What's up, fellow God gamers? I'm going to be talking about my Necromancer today since a lot of people have been asking questions. It is a minion-based Necromancer, and it kind of originated from the Kriparian video about minions, so if you're interested in that, be sure to check it out. I pretty much got bored of Druid and decided to completely wing it with the Necromancer since it didn't seem nearly as much complicated when it comes to the legendaries and whatnot. And I've been having a lot of fun. It definitely fits my playstyle a lot more, as I do tend to play a lot more of a minion-y thing. And one of the major things about it is that, well, a lot of people have been saying that it's just completely terrible. And so far, I'm level 57, about to hit 58, and I've really had no problems whatsoever. This isn't a particularly high level, which is why this is not going to be some sort of build diary. It's going to be, or it's not going to be a build guide, excuse me. It's going to be a build diary where I'm kind of like going to walk you through my process and all the steps that I've gone through so far and what I hope for the build to be in the future, but I haven't gotten there quite yet. So, as I've explained, the bulk of our power comes from minions, and especially skeletal mages. So we get hewed flesh, you get skeletal warriors, of course. Again, they don't do damage, but they are pretty useful. There is a legendary power that allows you to have 2 more. Currently I have 4. The legendary warriors, the skeletal warriors that I use are the reapers, which generate corpses, and there's a couple different purposes for this. The primary reason why we want corpses is because you really want to be spamming your raised skeleton. This allows you to give your minions a bunch more damage and also heals them up by a substantial amount. It says 10% here, but there is a passive which in fact says every 5 seconds your skeletal priest healing will heal your skeletons for an additional 60% of their maximum life. Unfortunately, this node is kind of doo-doo in some ways, because when you click Raise Skeleton, it heals them for the 10%, but as the node states, it's every 5 seconds. So the way that it's going to work is that even if you spam Raise Skeletons, the priest's ability will only work after 5 seconds, and once that ability that you initially used is going to heal, every other healing is going to reset, and you will then have to cast it again, and that will heal again after 5 seconds. But to be fair, one of the biggest criticisms that people had about this build prior to the game's launch was the fact that minions die, and I have not had that happen like almost at all. I've had maybe one entire wipeout where everything went down, and as you can probably see from the footage, it's clearing really well, and I'm not really ever running into issues even with big packs of elites. Another big reason why you want to be spamming Raised Skeleton is because whenever 2 single skeletons die, as it does happen at times, you know, you want to be consuming a corpse, because every time you do so, and this has a very quick cast point, it's super snappy, you can really spam it and it doesn't take any time. We generate 6 essence and we deal 9% increased damage for 6 seconds. And this is also another big confusion about minions, any form of anything that essentially affects your character affects your minions, at least from my experience. We've heard in the past that minions get 30% of thorns, of lucky hit or crit chance and all these sort of things, but as far as I've seen, that also counts for defensive. So armor, minion life, all these less damage taken from enemies that are nearby, which is, by the way, very, very useful, or close by, because if I'm standing on this on this waypoint right now, the close by is actually quite large. It's about the size of the waypoint itself. So I believe that through those nodes, and I can't guarantee you, my minions have been quite tanky, as I am playing on hardcore. I guess I forgot to mention that initially, but this is in fact a hardcore character. And I haven't really been having any problems with survivability for myself or my minions, having not even invested all that much in playing on World Tier 3. So, continuing, we get Decrepify. Decrepify has multiple very, very important uses. First of all, it allows us to get amplified damage, which allows us to deal more damage to any cursed enemy. But it also slows enemies, which you can use legendaries that give you more essence for that to allow you to spam even more Bone Spear whenever you slow enemies. But it also gives you a very good amount of damage reduction. Mine is only level 3. Obviously, you want more levels. I'm still trying to figure out where exactly I want to go with this, as the scaling isn't particularly good, but you can get another extra few levels on items. I believe +2 from an amulet and another +2 from something. I think it's boots. We also have enemies hit while affected with Decrepify have up to 10% chance to be stunned, which actually happens a lot because we're hitting enemies a lot, especially the melee guys. They don't do all that much damage, but they do hit incredibly frequently. And then we've got the most important part of Decrepify and why it actually ends up outscaling Iron Maiden, which is a pretty cool node because Thorns are very strong, even though this isn't Thorns, but it kind of works in the same way. It's Lucky Hit. Enemies hit while afflicted with Decrepify have up to 15% chance to reduce your active cooldowns by 1 second. And this has a million different uses for us. But the biggest one is Bone Storm is incredible. It's just a super good ability, and the reason why it's super good is the same reason as to why I'm using a Golem in the first place. Is because there is a legendary power which states each time that Bone Storm damages an enemy, which it does a million times a second per enemy, gain a barrier equal to 5%, 2 to 5% of your base life for 10 seconds. And oh my god, has this barrier saved my ass. There is a hidden property to it, which is the maximum amount. I believe that the maximum amount of barrier that you can have is about 50% of your life. Maybe it's like 50 to 75%. I haven't been able to see an exact number because I don't know if that hidden amount isn't scaled with somehow the level of the legendary, because I have been using the same one for a long time and it seems like my barrier is sticking around within that range, but sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. And so yeah, we use Bone Storm for that, which also is being casted on our Golem, as Bone Storm is a swirling storm of bones, appears around you and your Golem, dealing a bunch of damage. The damage actually doesn't do all that much, but it also has other properties. Your damage reduction is increased by 15% while Bone Storm is active, which is another large amount of survivability. And this Bone Storm lasts 10 seconds. It's got a 53-second cooldown right now because I've got some cooldown reduction, but it is 60 as a baseline. And then also, and this is a very important part of this, your critical strike chance is increased by 20% while Bone Storm is active. This is a super valuable node. 20% means that 30% of that also goes to my minions, and we are doing a pretty large amount of damage with the Bone Spear right now as well. So all of this combined is very valuable, and most importantly, that cooldown gets reset with your lucky hits on the Decrepify, which allows me to have the Bone Store up pretty much always whenever I need it. I haven't really came across a situation where that wasn't the case. The build doesn't clear all that fast, but you know, I do see a lot of people struggling with singular mobs that are coming from different directions depending on the sort of ability that you're using. A lot of people struggle a lot with killing white mobs. This build doesn't have any of those problems, and on top of it, there's another legendary which allows Bone Storm to consume up to 8 corpses to increase its duration by up to 8 seconds. Unfortunately, this rolls every 0.1 from 4 to 8, so mine is only 4.8. But this is something that is very, very good for that uptime. Paired up with the Decrepify, paired up with a lot of lucky hit, as your minions do get your lucky hit, in fact, even though it's not actually stated anywhere, makes for a very, very powerful defensive and offensive combination in the future, because Bone Storm also has a legendary that makes it so that it deals shadow damage, and then whenever it's dealing shadow damage and your Golem has another Bone Stone, so it's double rotating, your Shadow Blight is now popping a lot of stacks, and it's really going ham. So I'm trying to incorporate all of those things into the build. I do not have that right now, but we can finish talking about some of these passives over here that really you should be rushing early on in your stage. The thing about the leveling with this build is that you can kind of like really cater it to yourself. I'm not going to give you a rundown, you should pick up this and pick up that, because depending on the sort of gear that you have and the sort of legendaries that you find, you're going to have a really good feeling. Do I need more damage? Do I need more defense? What do I need for this build to work right now? And that's when these nodes come in, because as I've explained before, the bonded in essence is very valuable. Dev's defense is a super cool node that was recently buffed with one of the patches, which really benefited the build, I believe, a lot in the earlier stages anyway, and probably in the latter stages as well. Your minions cannot lose more than 30% of their maximum life from a single damage instance. So if they get hit by 10 billion damage and my character dies, the summons are still gonna be alive as long as it's not in quick sequence. So very, very good. After you have been healthy for at least 4 seconds, you and your minions gain 12% attack speed. You really get hit very rarely with this build, so this is very good. And then you've got Hellbent Commander, which is your minions deal 30% more multiplicative increased damage while you are close to them, which the range of this is about, as I've explained, pretty good, honestly, but I tend to stay in the back with the mages, as the mages do the majority of the damage. And I guess I can explain the reason why mages are so valuable for this build. Currently, I have 5 of them, as I do use a legendary that gives me +2. And we used the second setup, the cold mages, which have the ability to make it so that each time your cold mages damage enemies with their primary attack, you gain 2 essence. This gives us so much essence that, as you can tell, I am not, in fact, using the Reap that I pick up initially. And whenever I do need more essence, I just spam RaizQT. And it consumes corpses and it recharges my essence. Another big part of the reason why the mages are so powerful is because there is a Blizzard legendary, which I believe is this. Every 10 seconds, your cold skeletal mages cast a blizzard that deals 790 damage. The damage is quite negligible. This is a old legendary, as you can tell, only from level 43. Cold damage continuously chills enemies for 8% over 6 seconds. So the reason why this is strong is because, one, chill is very powerful. If you apply enough chill, that allows you to freeze things. And when it comes to bosses, that allows you to stagger bosses. Again, the damage is pretty negligible, but defensively, this is very powerful. It hasn't made a huge difference for me in terms of my clear speed, but it has made a giant difference in terms of survivability. Absolutely. And also, the range of the blizzard is actually much larger than the range of the auto attacks from the skeletons. So it makes it so that sometimes where they kind of have a hard time keeping up with you, sometimes they're just going to cast a blizzard, and it does actually help out quite a lot. Another big factor for that is that we get to use the control glyph, which is very, very powerful. Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, I can go over my legendaries as of right now. I'm focusing on HP. I'm trying to focus on survivability, although it hasn't been going all that well for me. At level 57, I've got 3,700 attack power, 4,200 armor, and 3,300 life, making my character quite survivable as long as I don't misuse my Bone Storm. I've got the barrier, which allows me to have a shield for 2k of that damage for 10 seconds every 30 seconds. This has been actually very useful. I'm surprised about how those go quite up. I talked about the blizzard. We've got your maximum number of skeletal mages is increased by 2. This is something that's very good, but it took me a very long time to find, same as the blizzard mages. We've got the Bone Storm that I've explained before. You want to get movement speed on your boots, and you want to get extra max evade charges. Once you get Sacred and the next tier of gear, whatever the name eludes me, Ancestral, you can get +2 max evade charges and even +3. So even though Necromancer naturally is a pretty slow class, having no movement ability, you can just spam your spacebar. But with this, it's pretty good. The legendary is unfortunately terrible, as I just haven't had a better one, but you know, as I've mentioned, I'm just leveling the character and but with this, it's pretty good. The legendary is unfortunately terrible, as I just haven't had a better one, but you know, as I've mentioned, I'm just leveling the character and figuring things out. Eventually, hopefully, if I live long enough, there's going to be a build again and whatnot, as I am trying to get to level 100 in hardcore solo. Then we've got the skeleton. Your skeletons gain increased damage while alive up to 40% after 10 seconds. We want this on a two-handed weapon. There's a couple things about the weapon that I still have to mess around with. So shields for Necromancer are very strong, and one-handers are very strong. This is an aspect that you can get from a dungeon that goes up to 60%, which, you know, it's super duper good, right? Because you can get 80% damage on a weapon. But the thing is that a two-hander is always going to be more powerful than a shield. The shield implicits only have 20% chance to block, and it's a percentage of the damage taken, which 20%, you know, in PoE terms, it doesn't really look that good. I don't know if that's necessarily going to save your life. But most importantly, the thing about a weapon is that I believe that the skeletons have a base attack time that's not modifiable by your weapon. From the limited amount of testing that I've done so far, whenever I use the one hand and a shield, the attack speed should be faster on my skeletons, but it actually wasn't. At least it didn't feel like that to me. Maybe somebody else can do more extensive testing. I know that I'm still gonna be messing around with it, but that unfortunately means that we are losing a ton of minion damage if that is actually the case, because not only are we hitting at the same speed, but also our main hand weapon is doing a lot less damage. Therefore, we're really missing out on a lot there. As for the weapon, you can get pretty much anything on it. You know, multipliers like intelligence and vulnerable damage are super valuable as long as you're having ways of applying that vulnerability, which in our case is Bone Spear. It actually happens to be very powerful when it comes to that. And then I've got the each time one of your summoning minions damages an enemy, they gain attack speed for 3 seconds up to 54, which is up to 63 on an amulet. And I gotta say, I found this really early on. This might have been one of my first legendaries, and it is super valuable. It works incredibly well with your skeletal mages. It gives you a ton of essence. It is just so good for single target, and attack speed scaling in general on minions seems very valuable. I know that other people for their builds run the Army of the Dead setup, and quite frankly, I think that's a grief. Again, I am still using this, but I don't think this does anything for me about 99.9% of the time. And the Army of the Dead has a very powerful legendary, which gives you like 200% increased attack speed on a weapon. But you do have to give up the 40% more damage here, and attack speed, unfortunately, would have diminishing returns no matter what with the amount of scaling that we get. As you can also get affixes on your gear that give you attack speed to your minions, which makes actually one of the bigger problems for Necromancer. There are a ton of affixes on gear that it's probably going to be very difficult to have a Necromancer that has very good affixes for its build, as there's a ton of different affixes and very few of them are actually very useful for not that many builds. So yeah, attack speed, super duper worth. We've got the Bone Spear, as explained before. Again, you can see my items. I'm trying to get the max life, that crit damage. I'm trying to get lucky hit as well, as that is very valuable. We're creating corpses, we're getting fortify, we're proccing the decrep. Very cool stuff. And I guess the final thing about the build, when it comes to all of these things, the golem. The golem is dumb. All right. I'm sorry to say this. The golem is a dummy, but playing on hardcore, the same way that I have to use Blood Mist for the sake of survivability, I am also using a blood golem, which gives me 15% damage reduction. Or not so much, it's actually my golem absorbs the damage that I would take, which I haven't had the golem die one time or even ever come close to dying. So as far as I'm concerned, this is pretty much I mean, it's like a health multiplier, but really is damage reduction, right? He is dumb. He gets stuck a lot. If you're using your golem, he does get an ability. I know that a lot of people don't even recognize that you can use RaizQT and golem as an ability, but your golem becomes unstoppable and drains the blood of enemies in the area. And even though this doesn't state it, you can actually use this to target, because if you look at Iron Golem, it states that command your golem to go to the target area. However, with your blood golem, it says your golem becomes a supple and drains the blood. But you can use it to target things, and he will run into a direction. He might get stuck into a wall. You might realize that your golem is somewhere 20,000 meters away because he's just standing there and hasn't done anything in a really long time. If a boss has a particularly large hitbox and you happen to click in the middle, your golem will begin to run circles around the boss in an attempt to slam his fist, pull the blood, or whatever the hell he does. It's tricky, but the damage mitigation is good. Whenever it's a single target, the active ability actually does a lot of damage. Because the damage is tripled and the base value is 170% of the damage. Pretty good stuff overall, but you can choose to sacrifice it. I might still do that in the end build because it does give you 10% more life. If you opt to go for that, you can get obviously more damage or more attack speed. Depends on you. But overall, I think in the final build, something like Corpse Tendrils might just prove to be effective enough for me to actually invest even more into defenses, allowing my skeletons to survive even better, and with the use of this, increase my clear speed. Because quite frankly, if I do end up dropping Bone Spear for the sake of Blight, that would give me another way to pull those mobs together, apply vulnerability, and maximize my damage with the exploit glyph. If you guys want to see Paragon, I highly recommend you check out the description for Crip's build. He also explains a lot of things for the build. This is my take on it. I'm still going to continue to modify it, but so far it's proven to be super duper effective, super fun. It's the most fun that I've had in Diablo, a game that I haven't really enjoyed all that much in particular, but seeing how this works and seeing how many people have criticized minions in this game. As for this part of the game anyway, it's had tremendous single target, decent clear, and overall an incredibly comfortable playstyle for a game that tends to be a little bit annoying with you constantly losing life and not having ways to regain it other than your HP potion, having to rebuild your resources and whatnot. You guys know how it is, you know? Some of you guys are probably fighting that white extra health mob right now for the last 10 minutes while watching this video. Things get pretty annoying. This build doesn't have that problem, and especially people who I've seen have been struggling with Bone Spear that does a lot of damage but not a lot of AoE. Have switched to this build and had a way more enjoyable experience. So that's pretty much it. Once I figure out a lot more things, maybe you guys can leave some suggestions in the description. But if I figure out a lot more things and if I continue to stay alive, we're gonna make a proper build diary. That's just kind of me walking you guys through my thought process so far. Good luck, gamers. Be sure to stop by my Twitch at twitch.tv/RaizQT. Subscribe to the YouTube, and I'll see you guys soon. Later.